edition of the DK Down Under Show presented by Daily Fantasy Rankings in conjunction with our partners at rotogrinders.com. Smatho and Big Hef here are going to break down Thursday night round 8 AFL action. We have the Gold Coast Suns taking on the Western Bulldogs at Metricon Stadium. Before we get into the breakdown of DraftKings slates, let's bring in our AFL guru, the Big Hef. How are you for this one, mate?
I'm very good, Smatho. I'm looking forward to seeing a bit of primetime Gold Coast Suns action, which is very new for us AFL fans here in Australia.
I don't think we've never done a show talking about Gold Coast Suns in quite some time, so this is going to be quite new for us.
It's going to be refreshing not talking about Collingwood and Richmond, so I'm looking forward to it.
Now, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of our DraftKings and AFL Daily Fantasy content. Also, get to dailyfantasyrankings.com.au for our slate previews, our cheat sheets, and all of our data tools to help out with your daily fantasy teams for AFL. All right, Hef, let me set this up for you, this particular match. So, Gold Coast Suns are playing at their home stadium at Metricon Stadium. They're taking on the Bulldogs. Bulldogs are actually the favourites at minus 147. The Suns are the underdogs at plus 120. The spread's 7.5, and the total points is 117.5, which is a very lowish total, due to the fact that the Gold Coast have forecast rain for Thursday night. It's got here a high chance of showers tending to rain at times, which are around 80%. So, Hef, we've talked about previous shows about how weather affects fantasy scoring, so we won't trudge over that again. But what are your initial thoughts for this particular slate on Thursday night?
Yeah, I don't think we'll see torrential rain by any stretch, but we'll see enough to make it slippery. So you've got to keep that in mind, that you still want to be targeting the guys who win their own ball, and get involved in tackling, and don't rely on other people to pass them the ball. But it's not going to be quite as dramatic as some slates that we've talked about. Gold Coast is a very exciting team, but they're a very young team, so they're still a little bit inconsistent, but they've been really good at home this year. Bulldogs have been up and down also, but the Bulldogs' best is very good, so I assume that's why they're favourites.
Now, at the time of recording, we haven't received the final 22-man squads for either team, but we do have a fair idea of what's going to happen in this particular match. The Bulldogs have actually announced a debutant in Cal Porter. He's $2,600 on DraftKings as a midfielder. There's no real injury news from either side, so if a player is replaced, it's usually just down to form. Let's build a core team for DraftKings contest here. And as always, we start here with the ruck position. And we've got two pretty much solid options here. Tim English, who's been going absolutely bananas in the last few rounds, taking a lot of fantasy scoring against opposition rucks. He's going to take on Jared Witts for the Suns, who was very good against the Swans last week. And with these conditions, this might actually prove a little bit tighter than what the data suggests. What are your thoughts here, Hev?
Yeah, I think they're really well priced here on DraftKings, these two. Witts has been a pretty consistent staple over the past few years for Gold Coast, and he's a much bigger body than English, so the more rain the better for Witts. As much as English has improved with his ruck work in recent weeks, Witts should still be too big and strong for him in that area, whereas English will score his points more around the ground. English is just going so well. I still lean to English, but $1,400 cheaper. And with Witts back in form last week, I think it's a bit of a toss-up. DraftKings are pricing these rucks really well lately. I feel like I say that every week, that there's not much between the two. But Witts is a reasonable contrarian play, but English is just going so well at the moment. I think he's the safer option.
If you can build, a team that you're very comfortable with, get English in. If you're just trying to strive for more salary, then there's no issues playing at Witts at all. So let's just plug Witts in for now. Hopefully we can save some cash for our premium players later down the track. All right, let's move on to defence. Now, this is quite tough. A lot of players are around that same 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 salary with no real standouts. We tend to look for rebounding defenders in the wet instead of the key defenders, because we can't get those +6 chipping around kind of stuff. So anyone you're looking here?
Yeah, that's a good point you mentioned. Especially for Gold Coast, there's a defender, Sam Collins, who is not noted as a fantasy scorer, but I see he's gone above 40 in his past 5 matches, which is pretty good going at his $3,500 price tag. But he does rely on marking the ball a bit, Collins, so slippery conditions wouldn't really suit him. We see Gold Coast defenders up the top of our cheat sheets when we're looking for value. A guy who stands out there is Charlie Ballard, who is another guy who's not noted for his fantasy scoring, but he's gone over 54 times in his last 5 games, so that's really good going at 3,800. And he's one of those guys who's actually a better footballer than his score suggests. So there's always a bit of upside with guys that are really good footy players. So I like Ballard. The presence of Nick Holman for Gold Coast has me concerned for 2 players in particular for the Bulldogs. The major one is Jason Johannesson, who seems very susceptible to a tag. So if Gold Coast elect to use Nick Holman to try and take out one of the defenders on the other team, by take out I mean try and restrict them, not anything nefarious. The other guy that he may go to would be Caleb Daniel, who's a bit of a quarterback there in defence for the Bulldogs. So just be wary of them. But yeah, like you say, it's very evenly spread, these defenders. Let's throw Ballard in. What do you reckon?
Yep. Let's get Ballard in for a bit of value. Hopefully he gets to that $40, $50, 50 fantasy point mark, and hopefully some salary to build elsewhere. All right, let's move on to the midfield. And there's some really good options here in the midfield, including Hugh Greenwood, who is just turning it up, as we call here in Australia. They turn up. If they get to 100 plus more, it's usually a great fantasy day. So he's the one in absolute ripping form. And you actually find him at the top of our projections as well on our cheat sheets and obviously on RotoGrinders LineupHQ. So what's your initial thoughts on Greenwood before we touch on other options?
Yeah, I love Greenwood. He's very well suited to wet conditions. He's very strong, but former basketball player, played college basketball in America. He's got great awareness. He's got great hands, and he's, after struggling along there at Adelaide, being played out of position the past few years, Gold Coast have put him where he belongs. 7,700, his salary hasn't caught up to him yet. He's a very good play once again.
All right. Now we've got the reliable options for the Bulldogs, including McRae, Hunter, and Bontempelli. Is there any issues here in rostering these particular players? Is there any tag alerts or anything that, with the rain, could hinder or actually excel their fantasy potential?
Well, Bontempelli is the one we're always on guard for with a tag. Gold Coast don't generally run with a really hard tag. They can use Took Miller to run with the opposition's best player. So that's probably in play for Bontempelli, but it wouldn't scare me off playing him too much. Hunter's an outside player, but he does seem to score well in wet games as well, Hunter. He's just got a great tank and he just runs all over the ground and no one really pays much attention to him. So I don't think it holds any worries for any of those Bulldogs players either. The one who really looks to benefit from wet conditions would be Tom Liberatore, who's in really good form. He's given great opportunity in the middle of the ground in recent weeks, and he's still only priced at 5,800. So the more rain, the better for Liberatore, but I think even if we didn't get rain, he'd be a very reasonable play too.
Now, there's 2 players I want to touch on before we move on. The first one is actually some value here for David Swallow for the Gold Coast Suns. He's currently at 6,700, so if you're finding that you can't reach those higher end players, I think David Swallow is very good plug and play for him. And then, as we mentioned at the top of the show, Callum Porter, 2,600. So we've been diving into the record books because he's a 21-year-old rookie, so he's been on the Bulldogs list for a couple of years now, and shows that his VFL form, which is the Victorian Football League, which is the Twos, or the Magoos we call here in Australia, stacks up pretty well. Can you tell us a little bit more about Porter?
Yeah, he apparently scored 201 points in a game last year. He averaged around 100 on the numbers that we've seen. He won the best and fairest for the reserve side there. And you can also buy a Callum Porter figurine for $99 if you search hard enough on the internet, which that's a bit bizarre. But 2,600, I like the fact that he's 21. He's had a few years in the reserves. He's been playing against men. He can play forward or he can play back, apparently. Obviously, he can play through the midfield too. Very good tackler, which would suit slippery conditions. He seems like he'd be the chalky value play on this slate to me.
Yeah, I think he is essential for cash plays and probably high owned in GPPs due to his salary. So we're going to plug him in. I'm going to plug in Swallow as well at 6'7", so which means you could probably reach out to McRae, Hunter, or Greenwood. You can just choose whatever you like. All right, Hef, let's move on to the forwards here. And there's plenty of value options here. When I say value, their ceilings are not that great, but their floors are okay. Obviously, the Bulldogs are favourites by a goal here. So if you're thinking of a Bulldogs win, you probably want to look at Bulldogs forward options. Is there anyone that sticks out straight away, or we just have to spread them out a bit?
Well, straight away, I noticed you can play Hugh Greenwood and Bailey Smith in your forward line if you have the money to afford to do so. If you're going to play the likes of Ballard and Porter and Swallow is a bit cheaper and Liberatore, you may be able to fit in Greenwood and Smith. And then we can play a ton of midfielders in our teams and avoid playing these forwards because there isn't any forwards that really stood out here to me. They're all quite inconsistent, low ceiling types. Forced to pick, I'd probably go for... I'll be working around... It's hard to go past Isaac Rankin, who's just exploded onto the scene here, a 4,900. If he was to repeat his first two scores, 65-72, then that'd be a really good return there at 4,900. Whether this is a bit of a down game coming up because young new player and teams start to take a bit more notice of him, that remains to be seen, but he's just looked unreal his first couple of games. Another young player, Cody Waitman for the Bulldogs. He's gone up a bit to 3,700, but he was quite impressive last week as well. In terms of the big tall forwards, Josh Bruce is a guy who's got a pretty good ceiling because he can kick a bag of goals. And at 4,000, he'd be one of my favourite options for the Bulldogs.
Now, on top of the cheat sheets here, if you sort of by value, we have Nick Holman at 3,300. He comes up as the most valuable player here. Any thoughts on him, plugging him in as your last spot?
Yeah, I think he probably will get a job, Holman, and that's always detrimental to scoring, especially if he goes to a guy like Johannesson and they both just go missing out on a flank somewhere and no one sees him till the end of the game. But if he doesn't get a job, Holman, he is a guy who's suited to wet conditions, really good tackler. Not overly blessed with skill, Holman, but he's a goer and he doesn't mind getting in there and having a crack. So I did notice a couple of rounds ago he's got 74, which would be a huge return at 3,300. Not a guy I want to build my teams around, Holman, but definitely worth a flyer in GPPs.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up the show here, Hef?
No, I think there's a lot of different angles you can take with this. I think both the Bulldogs and the Suns I can foreseeably win this match comfortably even. And it's one of those games where the team that possesses the ball isn't necessarily the team that's going to win either. So there's a lot of different strategies you could try here. And if you do want to be a bit contrarian, go for your life, I think.
All right, Hef, we'll wrap it up here. That is the Gold Coast Suns and the Bulldogs for the DK Down Under show. As I said, make sure you subscribe to our channel for future content. Make sure you get on the DraftKings.com to play AFL Daily Fantasy. And finally, make sure you get to dailyfantasyrankings.com.au for all of your AFL Daily Fantasy tools and previews. Hef, thanks for joining on the show here today, mate. That was very, very solid from you today.
Thank you. And
And we'll catch you on the next time on a DK Down Under show. See you then.
Thanks, mate.